Hello everybody, it's Mr. G, the history teacher, coming at you with another Misconceptions in History, and today I want to talk about anti-tank weapons. Now, I will not be going through every anti-tank weapon ever made, because that's way too long, and instead I want to talk about the groups, the categories that came along throughout history. And just for a heads up, I won't be talking about anything aerial-based, anything like, say, a Maverick missile, or anything that would be fired from an airplane or helicopter. I'll mostly be sticking to ground-based weaponry. So, of course, if I'm going to talk about anti-tank weapons, I've got to talk about their origins, and that goes all the way back to World War I. And, of course, it came from tanks. And as tanks emerged during World War I, there became a need to defeat them. Now, the earliest attempts to stop a tank actually were quite simple. They just basically started firing at them with standard weaponry. But the problem was that the tanks were getting larger and larger, or faster and faster, and better armed for their speed. Now, the standard German rifle at the time was the Gewehr 98, which fired a 7.92 by 57 millimeter round that you see right here. And while this is not a bad round, it just didn't have the penetration power needed. So the quickest and dirtiest anti-tank round was to basically take the round, reverse it, and add a larger powder charge. And this is literally called a reverse bullet. Now, the idea was that this flat end would hit, it wouldn't deflect as easily, and would expend more of its kinetic energy, providing more penetration. A major benefit of this would be if the round actually penetrated, it would actually explode and could actually be almost like a shotgun round inside the tank, killing the occupants. Now, eventually, the Germans had to create a purpose-built weapon. This would be the Mauser 1918 anti-tank rifle. Now, this fired a 13 millimeter round, as seen here, and as it was the first, it actually really had some problems. One of the biggest one being is it had no recoil compensation, no soft butt pads, no muzzle brakes, nothing to help with the recoil, and was just a beast to use. But by the time the Second World War arrived, pretty much every nation had figured out ways to improve upon the rifle. This meant that the rifles were easier to handle, had better stability, and actually could fire accurately up to about 1,300 feet and still penetrate armor. Sadly, by the time World War II came to a close, better improvements in armor meant that the anti-tank rifle really had seen the end of its days. And in fact, no nation uses these rifles for anti-tanks. Most of these rifles have been relegated towards anti-material roles. Now, another World War I invention to fight tanks and tank armor was the anti-tank grenade. Now, grenades themselves weren't new, but somebody in a very cartoonish fashion took one of these German stick grenades and attached a whole bunch of the warheads of them and strapped them together and decided that would make an excellent anti-tank weapon. From there, the anti-tank grenade just kept improving. One major improvement was the British during World War II developed the sticky grenade. The basic principle of this being a heavy explosive with an adhesive attached that could be literally thrown onto a tread or the side of a tank and allowed to detonate. But just like what happened to the anti-tank rifle, the anti-tank grenade kind of went out of favor. As armor improved, it became necessary to have something with a better punch. And in fact, only one nation still uses an anti-tank grenade, and that's Russia with their RKG-3. And we're going to follow that with the anti-tank mine. Now, the anti-tank mine, in all honesty, has not changed that much outside of its appearance. Really introduced during World War II, it is essentially a developed up anti-personnel mine designed to explode when a much heavier weight, not that of a person or even a light vehicle, passes over it. And to this day, they're still used, and the design hasn't really changed much other than improvements in explosives. At one point, there was even anti-tank nuclear mines, which obviously is a problem and overkill. Now, there were a few times they tried to change the mine during World War II, such as the RC Goliath tank mine created by the Germans, or the Russian anti-tank dogs, which is basically mines attached to dogs, and then the Japanese lunge mine, which is basically a mine at the end of a stick that they would just stab at a tank and let it explode. Another major development during World War II was the anti-tank gun. Now, during the interwar period, there was a lot of design and development on these basically light artillery pieces that were designed with a higher velocity, and with the idea being that they could increase max penetration. These weapons were incredibly effective, especially weapons like the German Pak-38, which was just devastated American armor. However, as light and as easy these were to transport, they would fall out of favor for something even more light and more transportable. And that, of course, would be the portable rocket launcher, which saw incredible use on all sides during World War II and is still used to this day. These portable rocket launchers changed everything because you no longer had to have an entire crew to service a weapon like you did with the portable anti-tank guns. Instead, a single man was now an effective weapon against enemy armor. Now, as a result of the lessons learned from using these rockets during World War II, new and better weapons would be developed. Now, the most mass-produced portable rocket launcher in the world, the RPG-7, is actually a direct descendant of the RPG-2 that was used by the Soviet Union during World War II. But there have been multiple portable rocket launchers in use today, like the American-made Law and the Small, or even the newer Russian portable rocket launchers, the MROA. Now, one weapon that isn't talked about as much but should be held in that same category is the recoilless rifle. These weapons were developed around the same time as these portable rocket launchers, but just like them, they are still being used and produced to this day. Now, the recoilless rifle is essentially a portable cannon that has been designed to change the directional venting of the gases from the round to prevent it from having a heavy recoil, allowing it to be man-portable, used by a single person. And the design is so effective that the Carl Gustav, which is shown here, which was actually developed in 1948, is still being deployed to this day. And now the last weapon I want to talk about real briefly in terms of anti-tank weapons is the more modern weapon that is being used all over the world, which is the wire-guided missile. Now, these missiles can be fired from ground-mounted units. They can be attached to various vehicles, like, say, a Humvee, or even attached to the side of a tank, and be used as additional support to the main gun in a tank. They are then controlled by a handler and flown several thousand feet, guided by that handler to ensure maximum damage. In the last several decades, they have been one of the most effective anti-tank weapons. Now, I know I didn't hit every point, and some people are going to be like, you didn't talk about anti-tank tanks and things like that, and I will be talking about those at a later date when I get into World War II tanks, because that is when the anti-tank tank emerged. And one day I'll talk about things like the Hellfire missile, which is an anti-tank missile used on the AH-64 Apache. As always, thanks for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you all the next time.